Hello everyone, this is Cardmates with you again. Here, you will find tips and tricks that you should always think about and that need to be appropriately adapted from one poker situation to another. Don't take everything you hear and read too literally and seriously. Always ask yourself why. In this way, you become a thinking poker player and learn to develop your own strategies. Standard approaches. Your task is to learn the standard approaches you should use in various situations, preflop and postflop, to know when they are and when you need to deviate from them. Poker is a game of adapting and learning in which tactics and strategies work in each and unique situation. In any given scenario, more than one decision will be profitable. Whenever we consider different options for a game, we want to determine our actions depending on which game gives the maximum EV. Small mistakes on the preflop. Many aspiring poker players and struggling players underestimate the importance of playing correctly preflop. They fail to understand that the seemingly minor mistake preflop can lead to a much bigger mistake postflop. Let's clarify this point by looking at the typical bad player at micro stakes, the loose passive recreational player. Loose passive recreational players limp very often or call preflop raise much more often than they should. Their rationale is that this is just a few chips to see the flop, which is not correct, because limping or just calling a small raise is, in their opinion, a cheap way to see the flop. They think this is an excellent price to pay for the chance to make a monster hand and win a big pot. Unfortunately, this thinking is wrong because they will rarely flop a monster hand. Instead, they're more likely to flop mediocre hands or draws, which if played incorrectly, can become a costly mistake because the size of the bets increases significantly post-flop. The following charts show that we're more likely to hit a pair or draw on the flop than a monster hand, such as a set or better. The probability of hitting a draw on the flop. The probability that two suited cards hit a flush draw on the flop is 11%. The probability that suited connectors hit a straight draw on the flop is 10.45%. Now let's check the probability of hitting a particular made hand on the preflop. The probability that you make a pair on the flop with an unpaired hand is 32.43%. The probability that a pocket pair hits a set on the flop is 11.80%. The probability that a suited connectors will flop a straight is 1.31%. The probability that two suited cards will make a flush from the flop is 0.84%. The probability that a pocket pair will make a full house on the flop is 0.73%. The probability that a pocket pair will flop a four of kind is 0.25%. Beginner's mistakes with simple examples. Now that you understand that we'll rarely make a monster hand on the flop, and most likely will hit a pair or a draw, let's look at two simple examples of how small mistakes pre-flop can quickly turn into much bigger mistakes post-flop. In these examples, we'll look at a mistake that loose passive players usually make when overplaying their hands post-flop. We'll look at two separated scenarios. First example, a loose passive player flops a top pair with a weaker kicker. Second example, the same player on the flop hits a Gutshot straight draw. In both examples, the effective stacks will be 100 big blinds. Hand example number 1, a top pair with a weaker kicker. Preflop, a loose passive player limps with King 9 of hearts from the UTG, and a confident, tight, aggressive opponent in the middle position raises to 4 big blinds. UTG calls, and then 2 of them see the flop. Flop, 9.5 big blinds in the pot. The flop is King of diamonds, 7 of hearts, and 2 of spades. UTG checks, and the player in the middle position makes a c-bet 7 big blinds into a 9.5 big blinds pot. UTG calls, and they go to the turn. Turn, 23.5 big blinds in the pot. The turn comes with Queen of clubs. UTG checks again, The player in the middle position places a second continuation bet with 17 big blinds and gets called. River, 57.5 big blinds in the pot. Well, the turn is 3 of clubs, and UTG checks again. The player in the middle position makes a third continuation bet of 40 big blinds and gets called. The middle position player turns the cards over and shows King and Queen of Spades, and UTG folds his hand, losing 68 big blinds in this hand. Hand analysis. This is a classic example of a recreational loosely passive player who plays too many hands pre-flop and overplays his top pairs with a low kicker post-flop. It shows how a small mistake pre-flop can quickly turn into a huge mistake post-flop, with the size of bets increasing significantly on each street. Well, in this example, you can see that the pre-flop bet size was 4 big blinds, but the flop bet size was 7 big blinds. The turn, 17 big blinds, and the river, 40 big blinds. By the time both players hit the river, the player's bet in the middle position is already 10 times more than his pre-flop raise. Let's now consider a similar situation in which UTG overplays a Gutshot straight draw. Hand example number 2, Gutshot straight draw. Pre-flop, a loose passive player limps Queen and 9 of hearts from the UTG, while a confident, tidy aggressive opponent in the middle position raises to 4 big blinds. UTG calls and the 2 of them sit the flop. Flop, 9.5 big blinds in the pot. The flop is King of Diamonds, Jack of Hearts, and 2 of Spades. UTG checks, and the player in the middle position makes a c-bet 8 big blinds into a 9.5 big blinds pot. UTG calls and they go to the turn. Turn, 20.5 big blinds in the pot, and 1 of clubs appears on the turn. UTG checks again. The player in the middle position makes a second c-bet of 21 big blinds and gets called. River, 67.5 big blinds in the pot. Now the river is a 3 of clubs. UTG checks again. The player in the middle position makes a third continuation bet of 50 big blinds, and the player finally folds. Hand analysis. In this example, the UTG player limps in with a rather weak Queen 9 suited hand that should have been folded. He has a Gutshot straight draw on the flop, which he will make about 8% of the time on the turn. He has pretty bad pot odds to call a continuation bet on the flop, but the call itself isn't all that bad because he has good implied odds against hands with a king. But on the turn, he should already be folding to the second barrel, not calling. This mistake cost him a third of his 100 big blind stack. Not as expensive as the first hand, but still a costly mistake that can be easily fixed. High equity versus weak starting hands. Another concept that is important to discuss is the understanding the difference between high equity and weaker hands. High equity hands, premium hands, and strong starting pre-flop hands that have high equity pre-flop and retain their equity while post-flop. Weaker starting hands, lower equity pre-flop starting hands that rely on their ability to improve to strong draws and made hands post-flop, such as flushes, straights, and sets. High equity hands. High equity starting hands are what we consider to be premium and strong pre-flop starting hands, including Broadway hands and strong pocket pairs, as well as medium strength pocket pairs. These hands will generally have strong equity pre-flop and will also maintain their equity well post-flop when they hit top pair or better. We usually think of Broadway hands as high equity hands because they have the potential to hit a strong top pair with an ace, king, or queen, which will often win at the showdown. Weak starting hands. On the other hand, weak starting hands are hands that usually have lower pre-flop equity. However, this does not mean that they are weaker in the absolute sense of the word. They are often considered to be hands with good implied odds due to their ability to hit draws post-flop and make flushes, straights, two pairs, and sets. Their ability to hit draws and make a hand is what makes them strong. Since they are often distinguished, they make good profits and realize their equity well when played correctly. This hand range chat shows some examples of high equity and weaker starting hands pre-flop. Have a look on this. So thank you so much guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like this video, please hit the button and subscribe to our channel. If you need more information, go to our website, cardmates.net. See you soon guys!